We're live on YouTube. Tweet it out. Still need to get the splitter.
Are you going?
I'll be at Purdue.
Okay. Well, I'll try to remember it now.
I won't. I know I won't remember, so I'm not going to make any promises. All right, let's get this. Let's get the podcast portion rolling here.
Sounds good.
Hello there, Hawkeye fans. Welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot here on HawkFanatic.com. We're going a little early today, Thursday, November the 3rd, a little after 8 a.m. Central Time, about an hour before we normally go. I appreciate Scott altering his schedule with little sleep last night. And we're both a little punchy today, but we're going to try to get through this. I've been at state volleyball all week. Scott's been pounding out Iowa football content. And that is, Scott, Thursday before the trip to Purdue. You're watching us live on YouTube. Hopefully we don't look too haggard. If we do, it's reasonable with what we've been through this week. But yeah, Scott, big week. I think the obvious discomfort with the Charlie Jones story angle from Iowa's through Iowa's lens, but we all knew it was coming.
Well, yeah, and it should. I mean, it's we saw this from day one when Iowa played when Purdue played Penn State. They had like 19 targets or something crazy like that in the first game, 12 catches, I want to say, and it was like, oh boy, this is gonna. And I know some Iowa fans already were like, oh no, do we really have to hear about this all season long? I'm like, yeah, you will. And part of it is just, I think now he's got 97 targets, and Iowa's receivers as a total have 89. So it's just it's an obscene amount of numbers. It's a different system. We all knew that the numbers were going to be different, but this is a big storyline. And I wrote kind of my story for Wednesday was that last week was about preserving its season. This is about preserving Iowa's future to some extent, because how Charlie Jones does against Iowa and how Purdue does against Iowa, really it will impact the recruiting the both schools will have against each other. But a lot of people will be able to use that against Iowa. I mean, they already have, of course, but if Charlie goes out and has 12 catches for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns, and they beat Iowa by 10 points or something like that, which I don't think is unreasonable to expect any of those scenarios, that's something you could throw. Look what he did. If you go there, you're going to be just like him, 21 catches, 37 targets. If you go there, or you go anywhere else, you're going to have a bit more impact. And so I think it's not existential necessarily, but man, it's really important for Iowa to contain Charlie Jones and then to win, of course. And so, yeah, he's definitely a storyline. I think everybody knew it. And I think maybe, if anything, Kirk might have been taken a little back by it, but the players certainly knew it was coming.
Yeah, and I think even a worst case scenario for Iowa is if Charlie Jones goes off and Tyrone Tracy also has a good day. If that combination happens, that's not going to be a good look. And it's certainly possible. Aiden O'Connell is just accurate. I was watching some of his highlights yesterday, and just super accurate, tight windows. I mean, that's kind of what you need to do against Iowa. You need to be able to fit the ball into space, and he does that really well. It'll be interesting to see how Iowa defends this, Scott. It hasn't defended it well. I think Purdue scored at least 24 points in all of the last 5, I believe.
I think the one that Iowa won, they scored maybe 20, but still, it's basically.
And that's just odd for Phil Parker. They don't give up 20 points. Yeah,
right. This year in 6 of the 8 games, they've given up, less 13 or less, and really the Michigan game.
And the 2 that scored are top five, right?
Yeah, right. And the Michigan game, I mean, it was 27-14. It might as well have been 20-7. I mean, both teams
Yeah.
scored garbage touchdowns in the afterglow of the game. I mean, Iowa went for it on its own, like 25 or whatever, and that's, had a goal line defense, and anytime you get past that on a third and short or whatever it was, that's what happened. But still, some of the interesting numbers I went back and looked was, over a 5-year period from 17 to 21, Iowa only allowed 92 passes of 25 plus yards in more than 2,000 attempts. Purdue has 14 of them, so they have 15% of the passes that went for 25 plus yards. And if you chop that down to 20, it is way higher. And out of the other ones, so out of those games, you're having 56. There were 61 games, 92 passes went for 25 plus yards. 14 of them went to one school. The other ones were 78 over 56 games. That's a staggering percentage of high of numbers. And as we know, and as we remember, one thing about Purdue that's really unconventional in college football is that they will attack you everywhere on the field. They don't have a real rhyme or system. They will attack you repeatedly. And a lot of times they'll attack you down the field when you don't expect it. And their goals aren't always to complete it. It's one, to scare you. Two, it's possibly to draw an interference call. Because if you got one-on-one coverage down the field and that ball's coming over your head, you're going to do whatever it takes to not allow that to happen. So it's a different style of defense because they don't run the ball either, and Iowa's built to stop their run. So that's what Iowa has to do differently. And it very well could be that, I don't know if they're going to do it or not, but they might need to alter their approach up front to be, instead of a two gap or even a 4-man front, maybe go to more of a, if you're going to go two gap, you might want to go 3-man front and maybe 3-3-5 or 3-2-6 or something like that, and put everybody back in coverage as opposed to play the front like you're playing a running game.
Yeah, and I was somewhat equipped to do that. Not having Terry Roberts certainly hurts, but Sebastian Castro has played pretty well. They do have some depth in the secondary. You'd probably have to play some guys that haven't played a ton, whether it's Bracey or Dees Fernandez, or who am I missing?
Well, yeah, he hasn't been available for a while, I don't think. But,
Dees
probably.
Fernandez?
Yeah, he hasn't.
I didn't even notice that.
Yeah. Xavier Wampa now is playing more second team snaps. TJ Hall, maybe. Just Jamison Hines is getting some thing there. I honestly, I would probably, if I was Iowa, just because of the way they like to play, is I would play more of either a 3-3-5 or your cash with a stand-up end that might have more flat responsibility or something like that, as opposed to always looking to stop the run. And then if they go to the run, then you're still in good shape because that's what you like to stop. So I think it's, and it's on Phil. It's incumbent on Phil because Purdue has made him look bad, and I know he hates that. So I think it's really a matter of how do you slow this down. I don't, as good as Charlie has played, and I think he's been exceptional. I thought he was good at Iowa. He's been outstanding there. I don't know that he's as dynamic. Certainly not Rondale Moore, and I don't think he's David Bell as far as just some of the things he does. But he's really good. But I imagine that there's a little bit of a pride factor with Iowa's secondary, and they're not as banged up as they were last year. They didn't have Riley Moss. Terry Roberts got hurt. Matt Hankins got hurt in that game. So I think they've got a chance to maybe play a little bit more disciplined against Purdue.
Yeah, Jones is kind of a different cat, man. He, you watch him and he'll run like a quick in or a quick slant and, get the ball, and just, he has that gear where he can just boom. Like if you give him a yard or two, he can get away from you. And then he also runs good deep routes. He's just really, for lack of a better term, a really technically sound wide receiver. And that makes it difficult. It'll be interesting to see kind of how Iowa goes about defending him. It didn't really lend any special attention to David Bell, and that didn't work well.
Right.
And if Purdue sees that it has an advantage and Iowa's kind of just playing the way it normally plays defense, and because Purdue's had 2 weeks to kind of look at personnel for Iowa. They know what Iowa's going to do basically, but personnel wise, and Braun will know where to attack.
Yeah, exactly. He's not afraid to attack. Going back to his first game against Iowa when they had the French receiver, Anthony Mahogany, that they went go route down the left sideline. And that's when Matt Hankins first got to play.
Yeah.
Because they had, Manny Rugamba got benched. Michael Ojemudia got benched. And then Hankins got in there, and then they finally just said, forget it, we're going to flip over Josh Jackson to that side and stop the bleeding. But by then it was too late. Iowa lost. What they did with Riley Moss in his freshman year. They just attacked down the field, and they've done that repeatedly. Now David Bell, they were a little different. They didn't hit him with as many go routes, but he was so technically sound. He was big. He could catch just about anything. He ruined his former classmate's day. Yeah. Julius Brents 2 years ago. And then last year, again, no Riley Moss. Hankins hurt his shoulder trying to tackle him when he was running a crossing route. So you wipe out two of the better cornerbacks in the country. And, by halftime, that made it very difficult. And then Iowa, as you said, didn't really adjust. I wonder this year, I'm sure this year that they've discussed it. And there's an element of pride, not that there wasn't with David Bell, but when who's on the other side, you want to be close. But, now the other one, Tyrone Tracy, hasn't done much. He's caught more passes than he would have at Iowa, but that's because of the system, not necessarily because of.
That's no great achievement.
Yeah, right.
No offense to Tyrone, but
yeah.
What Jones has 72 catches?
72, yeah.
What do the Iowa receivers have? Do you know as a core?
Catches.
As a group?
Catches, I'd have to count them up. It won't take me very long, but I know I know that the number of targets is 97 for Jones and 89 for
that's
receivers.
Insanity.
Yeah. So
and again, it is important to put it into the context and perspective of the difference between the two offenses. And Purdue is a productive offense, and Iowa's not.
Right. You can start there. You can work in scheme and style, but ultimately you got one offense that works and one that doesn't, and that's part of the big problem there. Now, if Charlie Jones was at Iowa, he wouldn't have 72 catches.
I wonder what he would have.
I would guess maybe about 30. Right now, Nico Ragaini has 18. Arlen Bruce has 17. So that's kind of where he would fit. My guess is because he'd be there their first two games, where only Bruce was the only real receiver there. I think he would have been. He'd probably be about 30, which again, that's not going to get you drafted, but 72 will. And I think people, NFL people, he bet on himself and he won, because now he's going to get drafted, and he's going to get drafted because people are going to look at him and say, he's a definite slot guy at the next level and probably a punt returner. And he can do a lot for us in those middle rounds. Probably, everybody goes back to Wes Welker, and I think there's a couple of reasons for that. But I look more at Julian Edelman. I think he's probably built more like Julian Edelman, and quick and physical too, can return kicks. I think he's probably in that category. So I'd probably put him as like a 5th round draft pick, whereas he'd be an undrafted free agent if he's still on Iowa.
Yeah, it's an amazing story, Scott, from, not, getting hardly any attention out of high school to going to Mac, walking on in Iowa, betting on himself, than moving. I know it hurts Iowa fans, but if you just step back and look at it objectively, it's a pretty remarkable story. You don't see it very often.
Yeah, I think most people can separate that they can look at and say it's best for him for sure. It's unfortunate, and I think more people are still kind of angry-ish at Iowa and look at it as an indictment. Now, if Iowa was 6-2 instead of 4-4, and if they had played well and maybe lost by a field goal to Michigan and whatever to Ohio State, because they were going to lose that no matter how good they are, that they probably would look at it and go, they'd be madder about it, get him. But now I think it's like, well, look at our offense. Do you blame him? No.
Yeah. Looking at Purdue from a defensive standpoint against Iowa's offense, at least statistically, and I haven't watched Purdue a ton. I did watch the Penn State game. I watched some of the Wisconsin game. Statistically, pretty strong against the run and susceptible against the pass, if I remember correctly. I don't have the stats in front of me, which doesn't bode. That's not a good matchup for Iowa.
No, they allow like 25.5 points a game. So they do give up points. They are they've done pretty well against the run for the most part. They didn't do very well against Wisconsin.
I don't think they did much of anything well against Wisconsin.
That's
the kind of seed that was planted that I'm like, I think Iowa has a chance here, a decent shot, because that's the last picture we have of the Boilermakers.
Right, exactly. And it's weird when teams have a dynamic offense. I think that's when people automatically go, "Ooh, this is going to be tough." But when you look at them defensively, they're better than Northwestern, no question. They're not in the same ballpark as Illinois or Michigan or Ohio State. So where does and Iowa State is really good that way too. So I think Iowa has the potential to mount some successful scoring drives on this team if they can complete some passes. And going over last year's video a little bit, Iowa just did not play well. It wasn't as much as Purdue did anything well other than George Karlaftis, but they just weren't very good. And Spencer was bad from the get-go. And then he had like 3 interceptions in the fourth quarter, which were all kind of, I don't know if garbage time as much as it was just, he was overthrowing and trying too hard. But I think that this is a situation where you've got an opportunity here. And I like the way that the offensive line came together last week. It looked the most cohesive it had all year. And I think they've got some potential there to grow, to get a little bit better in the running game. Maybe they hit the 100-yard barrier. Maybe they don't. But I think and I do think in the passing game, as long as they have the threat that they can run and they actually do run fairly well, I think that they can move the ball on these guys. I don't think they're that, that they're invincible or anything.
Let's transition that into what we saw against Northwestern. And Julian Vandervelde sat in for Jovan on Saturday for our Rapid Reaction podcast because Jovan was celebrating an anniversary, and then yesterday he celebrated a birthday. So we'll see if we get him this week. But he and Jordan Canzeri both said, I think cautiously optimistic is kind of the way to approach this because, as you said, Scott, Northwestern just isn't a good football team on defense, uncharacteristic. But Hankwitz is gone, and they had not been the same since he left. But, putting into perspective, into context, what Iowa was able to do, yes, it was like oxygen that you're like suffocating and need oxygen. And that's what it was like watching them. And it started up front, the ability to protect Spencer Petras. But I think it would be foolish to feel like they figured everything out.
Yeah, you're right. It's about baby steps right now. I think that's fair. And I think looking at them right now, you're going, it's a good start. Hey, you finally feel like they're moving in the right direction. And
because the alternative would have been to just being as bad as they were. If they were as bad as they had been against Northwestern, then it would have been whoa.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, if they would have won, let's see, they gave up that touchdown the last play of the game. I mean, it was
Yeah.
basically 33-7. If they would have won 19-10, let's say, or something like that, because they would have had their first team defense out there for that last drive. No, 19-7 even. That would have been like,
with a defensive touchdown and a safety or something thrown in there,
or 4 field goals and 1 touchdown, which is what they had. 4 field goals. Drew Stevens had a great game. But if it would have been something like that, you subtract 2 touchdowns, then it would have probably been like, oh my God, this is. I like, Northwestern had a really good edge rusher, so I liked the fact that they contained him.
Mm-hmm.
I understand why they did what they did with Connor Colby for most of the year, because he does have really high potential. And they figured, you know what, if you can make him a tackle, and that's his position, that's what they projected him as when he came to Iowa, that if he could take that step forward, it's probably better to grow with him, and then by the end of the year be in a better shape than you are with a fifth-year guy where they probably felt like had limited potential. But once they turn that page and they realize, you know what, he's a pretty good guard, let's just keep him a guard. That's where his success lies. And Jack Plum probably isn't going to get drafted or anything like that, but at least you know what you're going to get. And he's a decent pass protector, not against Aiden Hutchinson, but nobody else is either. I think that really built a little bit more consistency up front. Mm-hmm. And it replaced kind of some of the issues they've had at guard, and allowed them to kind of spackle over some of the issues at right tackle. Now, what's that going to mean in the next 3 weeks after this one? I don't know, but I think right now that's like, all right, now you could probably progress a little bit as a unit. And when you think about the future, Rob, somebody's coming to January who needs to have a pathway to starting from day one. And whether that's on the right or left side, I don't care. But Jack Plum will be graduated, and then there's Caden Proctor. Then there's no discussion, because Iowa always struggles with that of, well, let's just keep Colby out there. He's the number one. And now they can say, you know what, Caden Proctor, that job's yours if you want it. Go get it. And then you're.
It'll be interesting to see, because you had this kind of dynamic with Alaric Jackson and Tristan Wirfs, and I think the first inclination for the staff was to put Wirfs at left tackle, because that's where you want your guy.
Yeah.
But Richmond has now played out there for 2 years, so maybe it would behoove them to put Proctor at right tackle to kind of get his feet wet there.
Absolutely, because what we saw with that whole situation was, going into
saying that he could wipe his. You wipe his butt. Wipe his butt.
Yeah, right. It's like switching hands to do it. And it's like, oh my God, that became
a little bit too graphic. Too much information there, Tristan.
Yeah, Tristan, keep that one to yourself. I don't need to imagine you eating a bunch of pizzas or something. Deciding to play left or right tackle, during some breaks, but the dynamic was different then, because going into that 2017 season when Tristan was a true freshman and Alaric was a redshirt freshman, you had Boone Myers and Ike Butker who were right and left tackle. And Ike was the better prospect, but they kept him at right tackle. He was because Boone was more comfortable at left. And then Boone got hurt. They moved Alaric up. Then Ike tore his Achilles at Iowa State. And so then they moved Tristan up. And then the next year they were working on both ways. And it really came down to Alaric was much more comfortable on the left side than he was on the right. Tristan could have played either side, but he still could. And they're both starters in the NFL right now. So I think that's interesting in its own right. But I think in this case, because you have more space, time, and experience, that you probably start Caden on the right side and see what he can do, just hey, let's get you going here. And if you need to flip him, you will. But I think right now you just kind of take that and move forward. And if you have an offensive line at Richmond next to Colby, next to Jones, with Proctor on the outside, and then whatever happens at guard, if it's Bo Stevens, if somebody else comes back. I mean, last night on his show, Kirk was asked about Justin Britt, and he was, I don't want to say, it made it more or less like, hey, this guy's had a lot of injuries. And so I don't know if that means, medical situation for him ultimately, or give it one more shot. I mean, he's got that chance, but
is this
but
year
either way,
4 for him?
Yeah, this is year 4. And so we'll see what happens there. I mean, that's a lot of, he's had a lot of issues with that knee.
It could be a Cody Ince type situation where injuries just become too much.
Right. So maybe it's it's hard to say. I'm not going to retire him before he retires himself. But either way, I think what you're looking at is you feel like you could be pretty veteran from center to left tackle if you do that, and your best prospects at right tackle. And then maybe Bo Stevens, they feel like they like him a lot. I think after a year of starting, he can grow. We've seen that time and time again, that they put a young guy out there. Probably not as much as Bo, but Austin Blythe, Brandon Sheriff, they all rotated in, Sean Welsh, and then all of a sudden they become really good pellers for the next couple of years. And I think that's probably the potential there. And they also have Nick DeYoung and some others too.
Yeah. Ellsbury, Dunker. They've got some guys there, at least that got some experience this year. So that'll be just a step forward next year in and of itself. To if you're throwing a guy in there because of injury or something, it's not a guy just going in there for his first time ever.
Right. Mike Weslinski, they've got guys that are capable, and they've all played. They've taken their lumps. It happens. This is a bottom out year for the offensive line. If they could just somehow grow right now for the rest of the season and play better, have some success. Probably won't have a lot of success. Maybe this week they'll have a little more than probably the next 2 after that, just because they know what they're going to face. But still, that's really helpful, I think, for this unit in the future. And then you've got the starter kit of a really good unit. You don't know if David Koff's going to come back, but if he does, then there's another quality type player. And so I think overall you try to be hopeful and optimistic if you're Iowa. And I think right now Colby at left guard, at least it kind of solidifies one side of the ball. And if you need to move, run the ball in one direction a little bit more, what you got.
Yeah, going to need to run the ball this week, Scott. I think it's kind of no shit, but that's that makes everything easier. And they did that last week. Had balance. My guess is Purdue's going to load up to stop it. And I don't think the game plan has changed when you're going against Iowa's offense. It's make Spencer Petras and the guys on the outside beat you. Do not get beat by the run. So that's the challenge really for this line this week, is to just get down and dirty and open up some holes. And at least even if you're not just getting explosive runs, just pound and pound and pound, and then open some things up. And that's really, to me, that's the approach this week. And I also don't think the formula has changed in terms of the offense has to do something this week. You talked about it. Purdue's going to score some points, as good as Iowa's defense is. Yeah. So if we get a situation like Ohio State, Scott, and Columbus, where the defense is playing its ass off for half, gives up 133 yards to the Buckeyes, and then eventually breaks down, the offense is giving up a pick 6 and turnovers here and turnovers there. That can't happen this week.
They won't win another game if they play like that. I mean, that's just the facts, that they can't play anywhere near what they did against Ohio State. And so much of that was self-inflicted. I mean, it wasn't just Ohio State's got a great team. And I think I ranked them. I did rank them. We had our projections. I ranked them number 1. I think they're that good, but they're also not so invincible that they could just walk out on the field and do a Jedi mind trick. And
Iowa was giving them trouble early in that. Iowa's defense was holding up well early in that game. Stroud looked uncomfortable, which you don't see very often.
Yeah, and that's some of the things like Dane Brugler, who kind of runs our pre-draft stuff. He released his top 50 prospects, And he had CJ Stroud down to like 6 or 8 or something like that because of the way he looked against Iowa and Penn State. That they confused him, and I thought that was what Iowa could do and should do, because it's a zone-based coverage. You're not going to, and then they threw out kind of the dumbest and weakest excuse, and I called BS on it, a few times when people asked me, and that was, well, we had the ball too close to the goal line and we couldn't run our whole offense. Give me a break.
I hate when that happens.
Yeah, God forbid that they turn the ball over 4 times inside their own 35. But so I'm like, give me a break. Shut up. You scored 54. They gave you 12 points. You needed to do something with them too, and they did, of course, in the second half. But I think overall, it's just a matter of, take care of the ball. That's essential for any Iowa team, especially this one. Run the ball when it's effective. I think what I've seen is Caleb Johnson has really taken steps forward to be the most valuable running back on the team. I think he can be a really good running back for Iowa for a couple of years. And LaShawn Williams, I think, is very good too. I get kind of Mekhi Sargent / Adam Robinson vibes off of him, which is really good. Complimentary, could take the lead role if needed, but I think with a Caleb Johnson, I think he's the number one. He's the workhorse, and maybe it's time for them to kind of turn that page. I think they started to show that. I think if you have him and you have a stronger left side of your offensive line, a right side that's coming together, I think you got the chance to do what you need to do. Now you're just going to put points in the across the goal line when you're in the red zone, because they haven't done any of that for a long time.
We don't have a ton of time today, guys, so we're going to have to actually, let me get, before we do the reads and actually, you know what? Let me get to the read. Let me do it. Now's as good time as any, right? Support for the podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. Thank you to Systems Unlimited and all our sponsors on the podcast. We're going to take a little break now to hear from some more of them. And Scott and I will be back on the other side to finish up. I'm going to get some coffee too while we take a break.
Okay.
And we are back here on the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. Scott, I wanted to I thought your angle on this Purdue Iowa rivalry, I think there is something there. And you did a nice piece just kind of on the recruiting competition between the two schools, and obviously the Charlie Jones aspect of it and things like that. Kind of skimmed your article, haven't gotten a chance to read it fully yet, but just kind of talk about because I don't think people look at this one, and rightfully so, as like a Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Nebraska, and it's not at that level, but there's something here.
Yeah, there is. And it's not always about, we saw this with Michigan State like 10 plus years ago. It's not always about the borders and the, history on the field, although this will be, I think, the 93rd game between the two programs. So they do have a gigantic history. But I think what you're looking at is Iowa with Kelvin Bell has really tried to focus hard on the state of Indiana and Indianapolis in particular. And going back 5-6 years ago, they were starting to be really successful in recruiting there. Jeff Brom noticed it, and he has tried to really fight through that. And the rhetoric is really ramped up in a lot of these situations. I think what we saw like this summer where I want to say was out of the 6 players who there were 6 different players who visited Iowa and Purdue in June, or at least visited Iowa in June and had offers from Purdue. And 4 went to the Boilermakers and 2 went to the Hawkeyes, and they're all from Indiana. And then, and then you have Khalil Tate, Chicagoland guy who had Purdue offer. And so they are really in on a lot of the same prospects. And then you look at, Jeff Brom himself has been involved with some rhetoric, I would say, to some of the recruits that have been unflattering of Iowa. And then there's also been some, the text messages with one of the players who was here on the 24th of June, texted him during his visit and stuff. So that's something that is noticed and it's well known. And I think overall it's, we always say that you lose more friends and gain more enemies through recruiting than you do anything on the field. And I think right now that because they're in on so many different players and Purdue's trying to guard its turf and Iowa's invading that turf and has had an advantage in the past, that I think right now you're really, Purdue is kind of drawing the line at Iowa, looked at Iowa as a threat and as an enemy, if you will. And Iowa's now kind of acknowledged that. So I think that's really something to look at. And then you throw in Charlie Jones, Tyrone Tracy. This has more of a big picture vibe for Iowa. That if they get beat decisively, that's something that Jeff Brom can take any other recruit that he's going head to head with Iowa and say, look, we beat him 5 out of the last 6 years. Look what we did with Charlie Jones. And look what they didn't do with Charlie Jones. Look at this and this. Now, if Iowa wins, Iowa can always point and say, yeah, but over Jeff Brom's career, we have 14 more wins. We won the West Division. How good are they? So you can go back and forth. But I think that's it's something that's real. And it's something that makes this Saturday very, very important.
Yeah, no doubt. And we see it a lot, don't we, Scott?
Yeah.
It's an unusual situation with Kirk Ferentz being at one place for so long and having like a stabilized identity. You know who you are. You've had success with who you are. And then, Jeff Brom at Purdue or Scott Frost at Nebraska or PJ Fleck at Minnesota or Matt Campbell at Iowa State. They're all looking at Iowa as a model that they can follow. But to do that, you have to beat them on the recruiting trail. And they're all in the same footprint, basically. Iowa and Purdue, not quite as much, but Iowa went into Purdue's backyard and took prospects out. So it all kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Iowa has done really well in Indianapolis. Now, they haven't, it's been about 50-50 on hitting on those guys. A lot of them have left, Julius Brents or DJ Johnson or Tyrone Tracy now. And, Britt has been hurt, but then you also have Jake Higgins and you have Deontay Craig. And those are guys that they want, that would fit really well with Purdue. And he wasn't able to get them. And of course they got David Bell, which I wanted desperately, and that would have changed a lot.
He would have gotten at least 25 catches here a season.
Yeah, I would say 25, 27, something like that.
Probably. I'm kidding.
Probably start by his junior year. No, I'm kidding.
He's not blocking well enough.
Yeah, I know. He's not going to be in on third down situations when they run 12 personnel. All right, we're kidding. We're not serious, sort of. But no, they've been able to go into Indy and have some success. And
it's a really talent-rich area too. I mean, and Notre Dame gets pretty much what it wants out of there, but then you have Indiana and Purdue right there. And then all the other schools that go in there and it's a metropolitan area trying to pull guys out of there. Yeah.
And it used to be just almost purely basketball, but then it's grown as a football area. I think the Colts and Peyton Manning has kind of helped elevate at least the number of players playing football and doing well. And as you said, when you have more nationally recruiting programs like Notre Dame, Ohio State, Michigan, that they kind of, if they have somebody they want, he's a 5-star or a high 4-star, then they'll go in and get him. But that still leaves a lot of really good players that are available. And for Iowa or for Purdue, Indiana, they fight over those same prospects. Those are prospects that they all need. And so if Iowa can get 3 out of there, those are prospects that Indiana and Purdue needs, and it could be the difference. It's easy to say, well, we'll be all right without him or whatever, but what if that kid, and David Bell's an extreme part of it, but what if that player knocks down a third down pass and forces a punt, or catches the third down pass, or forces a holding call and a pass rush or something like that? Just small details are the separation in a lot of these games, and those separations in games mean separations in seasons. And then ultimately it fuels your program in the perception. If you're 8-4 versus 7-5, or whether you go to Indianapolis or you don't, a lot of times it's what that one player may have done for them versus what he did for you. So I think that's really where why this is big. And Iowa was able to get a couple of linemen, Leighton Jones and Trevor Lauk, but they missed on defensive tackle Kendrick Gilbert, who I think would be really good. The wide receiver Tibbs,
yep,
and Burnham, and then that other defenseman Will Helt. So they missed out on 4 guys that went to Purdue. So it's something that this isn't going to be the end. This is just just a continuation of it. So how Iowa does in this game has a lot of bearing in what happens in 24 and 25 in the state of Indiana in recruiting.
No doubt. And if you're looking at it from an Iowa angle, just kind of flip it and say, Xavier Wongpa, Caden Proctor, if somebody comes in and takes them away, you're not really happy. And that's not a good thing. And that's kind of what Purdue and Indiana, it's a little bit different because Indianapolis is a much bigger city than the Des Moines metro area. And there are more Division I prospects in Indiana to fight over, but there are more people or more programs in there trying to fight for them. Scott, one last thing before we get into our picks, I wanted to kind of hit on here because I've had some conversations about this week with some folks and kind of noticed this, narrative on Twitter, whatever that's worth. But I wonder what your feelings are on if Brian Ferentz can change the narrative on him. It looked good last week. It just seems like people have already bailed on him. I'm wondering if there's anything he can do these last 4 games and potentially in a bowl game to change things to where if he comes back next year, people aren't going to freak out.
I think that part of the narrative is already written for half the fan base, no question. That he could average 35 points a game from here on out, bury Wisconsin, Minnesota, Nebraska, go to a decent bowl game, win that decisively, and it wouldn't matter. They want change, and unless he changes his name and his appearance, it's not going to matter. So I think in some ways it's kind of gross and it's unfair. I understand it. The frustration, because I certainly don't think that 33 points against Northwestern is going to translate to 33 against everybody else. Right. And I do think that no matter what happens, that there needs to be an adaptation of how they call plays in the red zone in particular. I think it's been really bad. But also, schematically and conceptually, I think there needs to be some changes there. But there's been some weird blaming by some people, and I found this perplexing that after a win, and I wrote about it as kind of like a happy time for these. It's like the first time all year that the players could actually celebrate it and feel like, this feels good, winning. And people are like, this is what keeps people in jobs, and we don't want you. And it's like, come on, man.
I think there's a faction of the fan base that doesn't want to see them succeed.
Yeah, they want change at any cost. I mean, Rob, if I was to put a Twitter poll out right now and I said, which would you pick? They go 4-8 and Brian automatically gets let go, or maybe Kirk too, or they go
laying out a scenario here where the offense continues to look better as the season goes on, and
right.
And how that is perceived.
Yeah. Or what if they go 8-4, win out, which I don't think is that far of a stretch. I'm not predicting it. I think they'll probably slip up at least one more time. But let's say they do. Let's say they win those trophy games. They beat Purdue. They win their last five, and they look decent doing like they're gaining ground. But then that means that maybe they keep Brian. I think it would be 40% or more would say they'd rather see 4-8 because they want change more than they want success, and that's
messed up. That's messed up, man.
Right. And I mean, I'm not going to put that poll together because I don't think that anybody wants to see the results.
Nobody needs that aggravation.
Yeah.
You don't need that aggravation. You don't need the feedback.
Yeah, right. I've had enough of that stuff for,
No, I mean, and that's the thing too, Scott. You know this. You post anything remotely positive, and it gets met with, I don't know how, I think it is the minority, the vocal minority, but I don't know. It's hard to quantify what that minority is.
Yeah. Oh, you're right. I would say it's a very vocal, angry minority, and they're looking for, and there's some faction even within that are looking for ways to devalue everything that Iowa's done in recent times. It's 2015, over the last 5 years, the Ferentz era. I mean, I spent a lot of time last night. Somebody was asking me or saying Iowa was, so weak in the West and they benefited from everything. And I'm like, I got to look up some of this stuff. Iowa has the best record against the East of any team in the West. Iowa's the only team in the West that has beaten every team in the East since the East-West. Even Wisconsin has only beaten 5 of the 7 East teams. Iowa's beaten them all, since the split. So I don't like that. I think that's revisionist history to suit your narrative. And so I think, what's fair is you have to accept that Iowa is a really good program. What's also fair is to understand that I think the offense is struggling and probably needs some changes. Is that an offensive coordinator? Is that for Kirk Ferentz to take a step back? Is that for bringing in new talent evaluators in the offensive line and wide receiver coaches? Is that an influx of talent and changes with the transfer portal? I think some of that's all up for debate. But what can't be up for debate is this is a very good program that's competed at a high level for a long time. And if you try to take that away, then I think you're devaluing any kind of discussion you bring to the game because that's not accurate.
Kind of a microcosm of our country right now. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Please, I cannot wait for election day to pass.
Yeah.
I can't take it anymore. Football recruiting wise, Scott, we won't spend a lot of time on this, and I apologize to folks that we have to cut this short. It is on me. I'm having to cover state volleyball, and there's a 10 o'clock match to get to. Iowa City Liberty going for its first state championship, plays Pleasant Valley. So nice to see that the eastern part of the state has knocked out the central part of the state. I do take a little pride in that.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't happen often in high school sports these days.
Let's go Bolts. Yeah, I live in North Liberty. So I told my wife about that and she's like, wow, really? That's great. I'm like, yeah. I'm happy.
They had 500 students there yesterday.
Wow, that is great.
It was loud. I mean, they've done a really nice job of representing themselves this week.
I think that's, I thought once Liberty came to existence, and my daughter was in the second class there, graduated in 2019. I thought once they came into existence, I'm like, this is going to be a powerhouse in just about every area because it's a growing area. It's fairly affluent, nice, brand new school. A lot of people get into athletics and prepare. They're not just naturally talented. They, go to camps. They do all the right things. So I think this could be the first of many, many, many championships we see from Liberty for a while.
Yeah, Friday night, 7 o'clock at Liberty, at home to go to the Dome. Liberty football plays Carlisle. That should be a good one. They're closely seated. I forget which the seeds are, but that should be a good one. So if you're in the area and looking for something to get to Friday night, if it doesn't rain too much, go check that out. And quickly here, we'll get into this before Ontario Thompson's, Scott, defensive tackle out of Iowa Western, committed to Iowa after we potted, is that a word, last week?
Yeah.
he is a Dubuque Hempstead graduate, a kid that kind of developed at Iowa Western. He was not exactly like Charlie Jones, but overlooked coming out of high school. He's not maybe the prototype size-wise for a defensive tackle, but a nice addition. A nice addition when you have some veterans on your defensive line and need some depth. And I think it's a good pickup.
Yeah, I think you look at what they've got for the future, and I think he's going to have the opportunity to be a rotational guy right away. They've got some players, man.
Yeah.
The next few years that I don't think he should have any kind of false sense of entitlement that I don't think he will. I'm just throwing that out there, that he's got a chance to start, because when you got Y.A. Black and Logan Lee for one more year and Aaron Graves, he's got a chance to maybe be that fourth along with Jeremiah Pittman. And then you also look at some of the ends that can move in there. I think he could be a piece of the puzzle. And if that's the case, if he could play 10 to 15 snaps a game next year, that's a big lift. But I was really interested. Rob, do you remember him at all at Hempstead? I don't remember him. And I looked at his, he had nothing to speak of. So I was wondering, is he like a COVID casualty, where, hey, his senior year was during COVID, nobody really saw him, or is it just, hey, he wasn't that good or nobody was looking at him, so he went to junior college and bet on himself? I think he's a really interesting look. I can't wait once the season's over to kind of dig into that, because I think, hey, if he's that kind of kid, he's exactly what Iowa wants from that, is, chip on the shoulder and, really betting on himself here.
Now do that on offense. Now get some get some JC guys and some transfer portal guys on offense. That's what needs to happen here moving forward. And it's sometimes you have to be uncomfortable, and I will be uncomfortable doing that, but so be it. Got to address some needs.
Yeah, is it wrong that among my first thoughts was the same thing, which is, okay, that's nice that you got a defensive tackle out of the portal, and I know they have an offer to a defensive back too, but I'm like, you need to have some offers and some acceptances at wide receiver, probably offensive line. I would think that, if you could have one or two there, and whether they start or they're just competitive, but certainly a wide receiver, you're going to need one or two, because you never know what's going to happen at the end of the season either. They've got 6 guys right now who are on scholarship ready for next year, but the portal giveth and taketh away. So I think in some ways now the portal's not open yet, so that's one thing. But I do think they've got to start doing that on offense. You're absolutely right. I think quarterback's another one.
Yeah, no question. We'll see how that goes. And then we don't. Not that we don't respect the walk-ons, but for the most part, there are a lot of them, and sometimes we don't get to them until we get to signing day, and then we kind of touch on them a little bit more. But a significant one yesterday, Scott, in Jalen Thompson, a tight end out of West Des Moines Dowling Catholic, was committed to Northern Illinois on a scholarship, switch course, and accepted a preferred walk-on from Iowa yesterday. Son of former Hawkeye basketball player Rod Thompson. So nice connection there. He dreamed of being a Hawk, and he is a Hawk. He's a kid that I know. Talked to him at a graduation party this past spring and summer, and just kind of talked to him about how his recruiting was going, and he wanted to be here. And it's a nice pickup. When you get a tight end that's committed to a MAC school on scholarship to walk on, that's a good pickup.
Obviously, I think that's a tremendous pickup for Iowa, because, when you look at some of the pickups they've had, I mean, they like Johnny Jacuzzi. He hasn't really played a whole lot, but they thought highly of him. And I think Jalen Thompson's the type of guy that I think will end up, he could be a scholarship guy very quickly if he proves himself. And that's one thing about Iowa that you do have to respect, is if they have good guys who are capable of earning scholarships, they give it to them. They don't make them wait around, or they usually do 2, 3, 4 per year, and I think he can be in that ballpark if he can find a way. Because Zach Ortworth is a decent prospect. They get brought into Addison Ostrenga as a guy that they feel good about. Obviously, he's probably the number 3 tight end, even over Steve Silianos, except in blocking situations. And so, if he can come in and prove himself, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see him take that step and be a scholarship guy very quickly. Maybe not the first year, but maybe, right afterwards.
Really good athlete, runs the 4x1 for Dowling Catholic, which is a strong track program. So gives you a little indication of his athleticism. All right, Scott, give me the bad news. How bad did I do on this?
We both did over.
Whoa. Wow, I didn't remember that. That's not good.
Yeah, it's not good. We both took Northwestern.
Hey, we're experts. How the hell did that happen?
This was the point spread part of it. I think we picked even up. We could feel better about it. But, Michigan minus 21.5. They won by 22. We both took Rutgers plus 14. They lost 31-0. Ohio State, we took them. They lost. They won. They kind of broke away late. We both took Nebraska. Illinois was minus 7.5. I don't know why. It seems like
I'm done with Nebraska, man. I ain't picking them anymore.
I agree. I'm like, every damn time I think, okay, they're going to keep this close, or they're going to win, or they're going to. And other than the Indiana game, they've really ruined a lot of these picks. So, yeah, we all picked the same ones, and we all fell apart. So this was a bad week for us, no question. So we've got a long. I mean, this is sad trombone.
So if you're listening, and you can gauge this, if we're going to continue to stink or maybe turn it around, your choice.
Yeah. So you're 34-40-1. I am 40-34-1. So this has not been good, but we have a full boat, 7 games from now on.
Let's do it.
Yeah. All right. All the buys are over. Michigan minus 25.5 at Rutgers. What say you?
I see. These are the ones that get us, man, because you're like, yeah, Michigan's going to thump them, but that's a lot of points.
No.
I'm going with Michigan. Rutgers their offense is so putrid right now that I think this is a game that Michigan can cover, because I don't think Rutgers is going to be able to score.
Yeah, this is like a 42-7, 51-7 game, 51-10, something like that is what I look at it. But after last week, no, it's going to be close.
Yeah, Michigan's way ahead. They're winning by 35, and then they pull their starters, and Rutgers gets some bullshit at the end of the game to mess up the spread.
Yeah. Well, I remember our discussion about Michigan State was that Michigan State was going to, get a garbage score late and break the spread. But, of course, they didn't. So they decided to do it in the locker room instead, or in the hallway.
Idiots.
8 guys suspended, and rightly so in my eyes. Penn State minus 14 at Indiana. I'm taking it. I'm taking Penn State. I'm not even going to play around with that.
Yep. I think Indiana, Rutgers, both 2 of the worst teams in the conference. Not as bad as Northwestern, but bad. Maybe Tom Allen's looking for a job after this season. I'll take the Nittany Lions in this one.
Yeah, exactly. Michigan State at Illinois, and I think because of all those players missing, Illinois is minus 17.5. That's a heavy load. I'm going to go Spartans, just not because I think they're going to win, because I definitely think if it was a 14 points, I'd probably take Illinois, but I think Michigan State's going to make it somewhat close, but Illinois is a much better team.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Illini here. I doubted it last week a little bit at Lincoln, as we talked, in Lincoln, as we talked about. I think they're for real. And I just think Michigan State's in disarray right now. I don't like that hook.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that 17.5. I feel much better at 17. But I'm going to throw the points.
All right. Yeah, it's funny, I thought about it as I said it. I'm like, Illinois is a much better program right now. I'm like, a year ago at this time, who would have thought that? When you had 11-win Michigan State and Illinois.
Crazy.
But before Mark D'Antonio, they both were probably about the same situation. So They'd have one big year and then they fart and fall down the rest. But Minnesota minus 15.5 at Nebraska. I'm taking the Gophers. I think what Mickey Joseph said this week about that we're not chasing Minnesota, Iowa, and Wisconsin. We're chasing Ohio State. I think they're going to be chasing the Gophers, and I think they're going to get pounded repeatedly by Mo Ibrahim this week up front. So I'm going to take the Gophers to not only to cover but to dominate as well.
It's like the Stepford Wives over in Lincoln. They just all kind of flock to this narrative that they cannot shake. They cannot get into reality of this is who you are now.
Right.
The Gophers. Are these all the point spreads so far? Have all been double digits, haven't they?
Yeah, there's only two there's only two this week that are close, including this next one. This one actually has the potential to be a pretty interesting game. That's Maryland at Wisconsin. The Badgers minus 4.5. I'm going to go with the Badgers on this one. I think Maryland could give them some fits, but they really haven't for the most part in their existence. And this could be a tough game going there. I think Wisconsin, after what they did to Purdue, granted they took a step back at East Lansing, but I think the Badgers probably pull this one out, maybe decisively.
Yeah, I agree. I think that spread seems a little low.
Yeah.
They're begging us to take the Badgers. And that scares me a little, but I like that Terrapin's making a trip halfway across the country, a place they don't play at much, and we'll see how they handle jump around.
Yeah, exactly. This one's the biggest spread of the week, and I'm surprised it's this low, frankly. Ohio State minus 38 at Northwestern.
I think Fitz probably hasn't had that grass cut. He probably has let that grass grow on that field since August in anticipation of Ohio State showing. I'm throwing the points. Northwestern stinks.
Yeah, I'm going with the Buckeyes as well. In fact, he made that joke Monday.
Oh, did he really?
Yeah. One of the student reporters just kind of said, "What's it going to take to beat them?" or something like that. And he's like, "Well, we're going to let the grass grow about 4 feet tall." All right. Finally, Iowa at Purdue. Purdue right now is minus 4.5. I know it was up to 7 at one point, but it's 4.5 now. Rob, I think I'm going to go with the Hawkeyes. I'm not sure if they're going to win or if it's just going to be very, very close. I have an interesting vibe about this game. I think this is something that Iowa has an odd bit of confidence. And I think that if the defense is disruptive, especially early, that it can change the narrative. Because for the last 5 years, it's been the other way around. It's been Purdue kind of surprising Iowa. Now I think, all right, Iowa can kind of get into its underdog role a little bit, relish it, and take it to the Boilermakers as opposed to the other way around. So I'm going to take Iowa plus 4.5, and I'll see what happens there.
Yeah, I'm with you. As this week's gone on, I've had a good vibe about Iowa's chances in this game. Don't know if it's going to be able to win, but I think it stays within a field goal. That 4.5. That especially that hook, I like that a lot. So I think Purdue wins, but I think it's a field goal or less.
Well, look at the last couple of times that they were there. In 20, it was a 24-20 game. Iowa had a couple of bad turnovers late. And then in 18, when Julius Brents got called for that PI in the end zone, really wasn't PI, but he got called and they won by 2 points in a field goal. So I'm not saying it could be the same. Iowa's offense was much better in the running game 2 years ago and much better overall 4 years ago. But I do think Iowa's defense is better than they were in those 2 years. And there's no David Bell, no Rondale Moore. So now, granted, Payne Durham and Charlie Jones are pretty damn good. And Aiden O'Connell is a really good quarterback. But I think that Iowa's capable of fighting. And I think they've got a lot of fight left in them. So I think they're going to keep it close. And I would bet on them against the spread.
Yep, I'm looking forward to this one because it's kind of like a let's see game. Let's see if last week's gains by Iowa's offense are real or not. That's really what that's what my interest is in this game.
Yeah, exactly. I think, and if Iowa wins a game, then you've got three trophy games in a row,
Two at
and
home.
yeah, two of them at home. Wisconsin should be just like it always is, physical game. Minnesota up there, you know what you're going to get, and Nebraska at the end, you don't know what you're going to get, which is what you're going to get. We always get what we don't know what you're going to get with Nebraska. So, but anyway, a win or even a great performance from the Hawkeyes, I think, would go a long way for this season going forward.
Scott and I are heading to West Lafayette, and we will be back a week from today to talk about what we saw down there and look forward to the Wisconsin game the following week. And we'll talk a little bit. We'll slide in some more basketball. Hawkeyes open up this coming Monday. Neither Scott or I were able to make Monday's exhibition, so we'll have a long time to talk about basketball this season. We're not ignoring him. We just don't have time today to get into it. So we will get into it starting next week. So thank you everybody for listening. Thank you to all the sponsors. Have a great weekend, and we will talk to you next week. Say goodbye, Scott.
Goodbye, Scott.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Yeah. Well, I know you've got to run. Are you driving over like first thing Saturday, or are you?
No, we're going to go over tomorrow.
Yeah. Where are you? Are you staying in Lafayette or?
Yeah, I can't remember. Let me see if I can find the hotel where I'm staying.
I'm riding over with Chad, and we're actually staying in Danville.
Oh, okay. We're staying. The hotels were expensive as shit.
Yeah, right.
In Lafayette. We got like a suite because Dallas is going too. It's Pat, I, and Dallas.
Okay.
So I forget where I'm staying. It's like a Comfort Inn and Suites, or one of those suites type establishments.
I think I've stayed at it before.
I said he'd sleep on the pull-out couch, which is good because he snores.
Oh yeah. Well, if he snores, at least he's going to wake up and he's my back is killing me, man.
Oh, that bar. The bar was in my back.
It was in my back all night. Yeah. I can just imagine that. I'm sure we'll hear that in the press box. We know we're going to hear it. That's the funny part. Oh, we're still on YouTube.
Oh,